Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Whiskey Sour Libations and Conversations. I'm sober and your host, Dominique Lovings. And today's episode is very special to me because the people that you see on your screen, I hold near and dear to my heart. Our relationship stems back to my freshman year of college at Webster University, and we would go on to have a lifelong friendship. Please welcome to the stage Veronica Newton-Burke and Dr. Daniel Go. Both of y'all are Dr. VP, PhD, Dr. V PhD, and Dr. Daniel Goines. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This is Veronica's second time here because we was talking shenanigans last time. But
Yes,
now we're gonna talk some business today and keep it real with you people.
yes,
So
yes.
hey everybody, what's going on? It's been a long time since we've been in the same space together.
I know. And now, what you're in LA, I'm in Atlanta. Where are you at?
New Mexico.
New Mexico. Wow.
Yeah, that I know. This is so random, and we talk all the time on social media, so it's like we never lose touch with each other. But in hindsight, I'm thinking about it. Then I realized, because of the sensitivity of today's subject, I would not show that photo. I think our last photo together, we were at the vault. So where I
Oh,
would go home that night and get cussed out by my mom for no reason. And
yeah.
because she said I was drunk and I really wasn't. And I'm like, Mom, you have a weight in the middle of the floor. That's why I tripped. And she was not like believing me at all. And I'm like, it's right there. So welcome y'all. And I guess let's just hop right into it. D, you wanted to connect. You reached out to me about having a conversation about everything that's going on in higher education in regards to Black women and the things that we've seen transpire over the last couple of months with Claudine Gay having to step down at Harvard, as well as the president of, excuse me, Lincoln University, Dr. Bonnie Bailey, unfortunately taking her life. And she had been also vocal about the tumultuous things that her role as president, vice
Oh,
president,
VP, Vice President.
yes, vice president being very kind of like tumultuous at Lincoln. And, I said, the perfect person to be a part of this conversation as well is Veronica because she is also Black in higher education. And so we have this dialogue that will transpire right now. So you have the floor.
Cool, appreciate it. It's good to see both of y'all in this setting. So many years later, but yeah, it's just something that is, we think about um, the academia and higher education in general and what is transpiring to women of color in higher education. I think it just raised a bigger question of, are we really asking Black faculty, Black staff, and even Black students, female students, when people identify as female students on campuses, how are you? So we get caught up in the, oh, I'm good, and we keep it moving, but I think we aren't really taking the time to understand and find out how our Black faculty and staff and administrators are doing on campuses. And so having a daughter now, and like, just women in my family being married and all that, but it's like i'm I'm more aware now of the struggles that Black women go through in the workplace, in higher education. I can't say I can relate, but I can say I'm more aware, and so I'm calling people out to do better, and especially administrators to do better when it comes to taking care of Black women on our campuses and people of color on our campuses. So thank you for creating the environment to further have that conversation.
So, oh, and you're very welcome. So I want to pass it to Veronica because you are, teaching in Atlanta. And what does that look like to hold people accountable and really speak up and stand up for you? So, like, also D is aware of what to look for, how to be like, or, and like kind of creating those spaces for people that look like us going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Atlanta is obviously some of our institutions are, obviously very different. I'm at Georgia State University, and so most of my PhD students and grad students are Black, but also are Black women. And so obviously they're coming to me as a Black woman mentor, right? But not only that, my research area specifically looks at Black undergraduate women's experiences with gendered racism at predominantly white institutions. And so I actually have a book coming out next year titled There's Racism in the Building and Patriarchy in the Yard. Black Women Navigate Discrimination at a White University, coming out with SUNY Press next year. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully, maybe I'll be back on the podcast when the book drops. But really, we're not just talking about systemic racism on campus. We're talking about systemic patriarchy as well, or male domination that creates environments, big and small, for women. We have to constantly prove ourselves, over explain, or just have to manage other people's expectations and assumptions about our academic abilities that have nothing to do with how we look, right? But it has everything to do with how they think we are looking in these spaces, which is to be deemed as unprofessional. Even though we know that there are more Black women in positions of power in these institutions of higher education and different types of institutions of higher education. So I think it's important that we also talk about the different types of institutions. I'm at a state university, which is much different than a private university, which is also much different than HBCU, right? Or a liberal arts university where we all went, like for my freshman year. These are different types of institutions. And so what can be done oftentimes can be limited by the type of institution it is. For example, Georgia State, we are a state institution, which means we are state employees. So not only do we have to abide by the rules of Georgia State University, we also have to abide by the rules literally of the state senator, because they do our budgets every year. So we're in a very precarious situation, state universities are, especially universities that are red states, right? Like Missouri or Georgia or Florida. I mean, we see what's happening in Florida that's trying to ban every damn thing, right? So you have to do this very delicate tango to try to get your research done, to try to get your grad students through, while not raising too many red flags from the people at the top. And so you have to be very strategic and very well rounded and very much well versed, because if not, it can be your job. And I'm not tenured yet. I go up for tenure next year, so my position isn't necessarily secured until I'm tenured. So there is a lack of Black women getting tenure, a lack of Black faculty getting tenure. And that's important to note, because that means our permanence in higher education is not there. Unlike how white men and white women are always there, right? We're not there for the long haul. And so that does have a larger impact on the rest of the campus culture.
That was a lot to take in, and I'm like, dang, like I never really thought about it like that, the ins and outs and the day to day. And so I'm like, wow, this is like another layer of stress that's added to you guys' plate having to deal with this, because people want to be weird and people don't want to, like, as inclusive. Like, I'm thinking about how everything was, and DEI, everything as like 2020 is happening, Black Lives Matters movements and all these things, like I just got an email for Webster, like, oh, come to this free DEI. And I'm like, wait a second. Now, I'm not going to start on them, Daniel, because I could go. But also, I'm like, you're kind of late to the party, and we know what's happening at a lot of these corporations where all of that DEI inclusion, like they're doing away with it. It was just like it was cool for the moment. Like you hear influencers talking about, oh, I no longer have a brand deal with this company or that company because they don't see value in people that look like me. And so for you, D, what does that look like for you? You know, you being in Mexico, and I know you're trying to, you know, working on making moves to go elsewhere. But for you, like, what does that look like in the culture where you are?
Yeah, so it's not a lot of black people in New Mexico,
Yeah.
and I knew that before I got here,
Hmm.
but I didn't know it at the same time. I knew like overall like not a lot of black people, but really like it's like you see somebody black, I get happy. Like yo, somebody black. But I think navigating that anywhere, but especially here in New Mexico, all I do is go to work and go home and any extracurricular activities that my kid has. But in the workplace, um, it is a job to navigate spaces being a credentialed black man. But I would say here in New Mexico that um, black people are not the only minority. So it's a little it's a little bit of walking room here. But I will say in Texas, going back to Veronica's point about red states, navigating being an administrator in Texas, very challenging. The politics, I call them the politics every day, having to navigate that. But then also being from St. Louis and understanding how to leverage relationships throughout the politics to get what you need or want is that lesson is invaluable. But definitely in Texas, because again you have those state laws. Worked at a public institution in Texas, you're an employee of the state, and you may not always agree with state legislation, and business practice and core values often collide. And so, as a black man, it's very the line to walk. You have to be very delicate with not only what you say but what you do as well, because it still is a state um, institutions. But I found it to be um, not as hard as black women. That line is not the same that black women have to line. And of course, we see it with our white colleagues of, man, that looks very easy for you, and you may not have had these challenges, and it's hard to explain. And you get tired of using that energy to explain the hoops that you have to jump through to people who don't look like you, because I think it's, oh, you make this look so easy. Be having to do it for your whole life, then of course it's of course
Yeah.
it's I can make this look easy, but at the end of the day, like it's still hard, and you still have a job to do, and still have ultimate destinations where you're trying to reach. So you got to play the game. You got to play the politics sometimes.
Now, Veronica, you studied in Austin. You ended up was finishing undergrad in Austin, and then would end up going to Mizzou for grad school. And ultimately, what was your experience like navigating, even just like trying to be a student in those spaces, like those PWI spaces, trying to get your voice heard, trying to get people to understand you and really, really hear you? Because I've been to Austin. I have family in Austin, and I know like the percentage of us was like 5%, and I think it dropped if I'm not mistaken. And then to have to go somewhere like Mizzou, where where y'all like to throw cotton on y'all multicultural center, like the Black Student Center, like on the ground, like, how is it navigating those spaces? I only know, like what I know. And growing up in St. Louis, and I want people that are watching and listening to understand that St. Louis is very, very black and white. I think our Latino population just slightly increased, but it is still very segregated in St. Louis, where I have one of my really good friends, his boss's family moved to like South County because it's like, oh, it's a lot of white people. and we feel like it'll just be us, and I'm like, oh, it's black people out there, but also how it must be nice to just speak so freely and think so freely like that without any sort of repercussions.
Mm-hmm.
And and on a daily, because I'm like, when I encounter people and you're trying to break it down, I remember on a recent episode, I had one of our classmates from Webster who had gone through alcohol addiction, and we were talking about the ins and outs of that and certain things. And he said, he's like, I couldn't imagine like having to deal with the BS that y'all have to go through on a daily, just because it's at this point, it's like we can't even be comfortable in our own homes.
Right.
So what did that look like for you in those spaces and trying to navigate, which will ultimately lead you to Georgia, another red state.
Right. Right, but the caveat is I'm in Atlanta, so
Okay,
and and so
it's red around.
yeah, I mean, I'm living obviously Atlanta is like the blue dot, right, in the red state, and so Atlanta, and I think that's one draw, obviously, of Atlanta, and being at GSU where I'm at is because not only am I in a black city, our campus is literally downtown,
Yeah.
and we have majority black students, majority students of color, and most of my all my students are black. I mean, so it's really interesting that so not to say that Georgia State isn't a white system, right, and operates in that way, but the culture at GSU is much different than a Mizzou or a UT Austin or a Texas State, right? But I obviously chose to become a professor here purposefully, right, because I wanted to be able to teach black PhD students and get more black sociologists out there into the world. And obviously now being a professor, being on the other side is, you have certain power, certain some level of power, right? Like we have certain level of autonomy. We can teach our own classes and things like, make our own syllabi, so on and so forth. And so, I definitely appreciate that. So I definitely feel like I paid my dues, right? But thinking about, I went to white schools, my entire life, right? So from K through all the way up to the PhD. And so, one thing kind of that Dee was saying, Dr. Goines was saying, is that you learn how to navigate white spaces and being able to get your things done that you want to be able to get done, right? And so one thing, whiteness works in a very specific ways. If you study it, if you watch it becomes very predictable. And so that's what I've done, right? And so not only through my studying, right, but through my research and readings as well. And so, it made but those experiences at Texas and at Mizzou definitely made me have a very clear understanding of where I wanted to put my effort and energy, right? So I no longer wish to try to convince white people that racism exists and that they have white privilege. I'm not gonna, I'll talk to a wall, I'll talk to the cat, I'll talk to a bat, a rat, whatever, before I continue to have a conversation with everyday white folks about racism. I don't feel like it's very beneficial, and it drains my mental health, hooking it back to your mental health piece, right? If I'm trying to convince you that water is wet and you don't understand that, what is going to make it different tomorrow, right? Because their lived reality tells them that water ain't wet, right? So you really can't change white people's live reality, meaning the way that they live as white people is not going to change because these systems and societies reaffirm their identities and privileges at all times. So who are you as a black person or a black student to tell, Connor, whose dad contributed a half of a library, right, to the university? How dare you as a black person even, right? So it was a lot of that, right? And so, but I think understanding their resistance made me realize how powerful my voice actually was, and how powerful it is to read Black voices, read Black scholars, read Black scholarship across sociology, psychology, anthropology, history, whatever it may be, education policy, whatever it may be. I'm gonna read it, right? Because next time it come around, I got some for that ass, right? And you might not be ready. So, and so it definitely, whenever I see that resistance, it makes me it just reaffirms what we already know
Yeah.
about them, but also what we know about the power of Black power and Black knowledge, and how threatened whiteness is, to those things, especially out the mouths of Black women.
Yeah. D, you put in the chat a question which would be perfect for here. It says, how can higher education institutions address systemic barriers to success for minority faculty and staff in higher education? So I want to start with you. I want you to answer your question, and then we're going to pass it to Veronica.
Yeah, I think as an administrator, and then as a candidate for those chief leadership opportunities, chief administrator opportunities, and going through those processes now, I think it's important really to create the space. We do that for students, so we'll have like Black Student Union, um, Muslim Student Union, or a Baptist Student Union, or associations, or whatever the case is. And I think there's nothing wrong with doing that same thing on the faculty and staff side. I know there's faculty councils, but there could be like Black faculty coalitions, Black staff coalitions. I think if institutions, universities, and colleges recognize the need for that, and how it's important to be able to go all the way back to, I think maybe we were in middle school or high school when this book came out about why do, I think it was titled like, why do all the Black kids sit at this table in the cafeteria, or something like that. Even in the workplace, like why that's important, and what that can mean, why that's valuable. So I think if there's spaces, even on campuses, I think that's what institutions do. You recognize the need for that first, and then you can say, oh, we're inclusive, or we are an open space and safe space for these types of things. But are you really, show us what you're doing for um, members of your community who are Black, or people of color who need that support. It's like, those memes and videos about like people like going to a potluck, and you're like, we're not going to the potluck. We're not going to the office potlucks. If we're going, we're not eating nothing from the office potlucks. How important is it for the university to say, we may recognize that about your culture. Here's some local businesses we partner with in the community to cater this event for this space for this day. Even in Black History Month, it's like, what are universities doing to recognize this, like for faculty and staff? And so I think recognizing the need for spaces and opportunities for Black people to get together on campus, and without judgment. And I think, leadership at institutions, I think if I was at a university as a Black staff member and our president or chancellor was Black, and they said, I'm about to go over to this spot, and it's a known spot for Black faculty and staff member, I think that automatically will show Black faculty and staff, okay, it's okay to go here. We know this is a spot for us. It's kind of been endorsed by that leader of our institution. But if folks are uncomfortable to do that, if white leaders are uncomfortable to do that, then it just makes it awkward for everybody. And it goes back to that navigating the space and understanding the room that you're working with. But I think the general recognition for that and the need for that, I think, is where we start.
Do you think that that sounds a little bit kind of like easier said than done? Because it's cool to have the conversation, but do we feel like trying to be PC. I'm not trying to get canceled before I start. But I'm like, do you feel like this is really plausible in our spaces? Because I'm thinking about even situations that happen to myself or my other Black friends when when we were even at Webster, and even having faculty, like the few faculty that we had that look like us, when things happen, they wouldn't even like really speak up and vouch for us. And I don't know if it was more of a, listen, I did a lot of work to get to this role, so I'm not trying to shake the table. Word to K Michelle, but I am. You just gonna have to table that and just kind of let it roll off your back, though you were in a messed up situation that they really could have evoked like change for you,
Hmm.
but because of likely that, or like the history of a professor being adjunct for so long and not really, going the distance for you. And
Sure.
I think my concern with this conversation is just like similar to what everybody's experiencing now with these other companies. Well, it's good for the moment, but long term, will this still be in play?
Yeah, that's a great point, and I recognize the
I feel
resistance.
angry. I'm sorry.
Uh, oh, and that's a problem. Like, why are you even feeling angry having to even talk about this? And then there's others who are having to experience this and being in and talk about it, and
Yeah,
you know, it didn't come across as anger. But I think to answer your question, there is some resistance there, but I think the landscape of higher education is changing, and I think the leadership is changing. To your example, I think maybe those faculty maybe didn't feel comfortable because they didn't feel supported or backed to be able to show we care for the students. Like that's a tagline. We are here to support students. We care about
right.
students. But who's caring for the faculty and staff who care for those students? And so for me, my approach even now and even down the line, as I'm looking at these presidencies and chancellorships, we have to make it a priority to take care of our faculty and staff to where they feel this amnesty of, if you speak up, you're not going to get in trouble or be reprimanded or anything in the academic side of the house or the staff side of the house. So I think folks are just not feeling supported. There's a lack of camaraderie, and knowing what that feels like, not being able to speak up for others, I think the empowerment piece. So for me, on my agenda and challenges turned into opportunities, I think it's I think it's doable, but it is easier said than done. But it's just about putting in the work and having the leadership and people in positions to really be about that action.
Yeah. V.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things and more, right? I mean, but it's it's also um, the black tax that we talk about, right? And so that not that it's hard enough for us to get to these positions, but then the caretaking we do with our undergrads and our grad students, and just making sure that that they get themselves through, and they have their own issues and problems that come up, and sometimes they need support in other ways as well. And so um, being able to, I think it can go many ways. I think if we're talking about departmental level support, like the College of Arts and Sciences can give departments maybe more funding, right, to
Yeah.
sponsor some of those things that that Dee was talking about, right? I think to me that would be a little bit. I can only speak um, from my institutions in this regard. I think they would be. My department would be thrilled to get more funds to do stuff like that, even if it's just for faculty, right? For small outings, because we kind of have to come up with those things on our own. Like the university is not like, hey, you guys have been doing so great. Let me give sociology an extra 10 grand. Like, you know what I mean? They're like, that's just not, so we have to kind of do that extra work. And so then for me, the question goes to who's actually doing that work then. And unfortunately, that work unfortunately falls on Black women more so than not. And sometimes it's not even Black women faculty, it's Black women staff, right? But I also want us to think about the Black people at the university who do our cleaning and janitorial services, and their presence on campus matters as well. And so maybe it's a larger conversation of Black employees on campus and showing appreciation for those people who literally make our universities go round and round and round. We wouldn't be able to exist without people cleaning and making sure those functions our buildings are functioning, right? So I think that it could be, yes, faculty. So I'm thinking faculty, staff, but also all types of staff, not just our staff in our office, right? Being a part of a larger conversation of needs of Black employees, because the problem is there's not that many Black professors.
Yeah.
So you need numbers in someplace else. And the numbers are unfortunately in these lower kind of hierarchical positions, unfortunately, in the academy, which are, the grounds people, the janitor people, so janitorial services. And so I think looking at some of their needs as well and painting it as, hey, these are something that all Black faculty needs,
Right.
all staff needs, Black employees need, right? So maybe just reframing that, because I'll say that I talk to more of the janitorial folks than I've ever talked to the dean.
Yeah. And it's always like that, even at my job, working in, fashion and having such close proximity to directors and, all of that. And I can count. I've spoken to the CEO. We've crossed paths, no hellos, no. The most I think he said to me was at the holiday party this year when I was trying to sneak out because I saw that we wasn't getting the bonus and they was gonna give me another blanket.
Right, and but that's what it is. Like, don't throw us pizza parties. Give us real incentives, right? Like, give me something that's gonna make me like. Yes, like we want to have those gatherings and things like that, but make it be, give us little reward awards or something. You know what I mean? I mean that's more tangible, right? And that's the first step to, something else that can happen that can lead to the recognition, right? Because people don't want to also do the work and not be recognized.
Yeah. No, and that's for sure. And that's my thing. Is like, okay, we talk about, like forcing our hand and doing all this change, and is it really gonna matter? Like, are y'all really gonna hear our voices? Like, are y'all really gonna take it to consideration? It's not just beneficial for us in the long run. It's like beneficial to everybody that works here. Like, I think about how everybody literally, like, we have the majority of the company, like the warehouse workers, they're Latinos, like, from everywhere, then it's like 2 Black girls, myself. Oh, wait, it's a third, but but that work in corporate. And you guys have like now almost 100 stores. Yes, so you get Blacks here and there in the stores, but it's like, okay, when everything was happening, nobody ever said anything. We're going to donate to this or do how you feeling or anything, which don't come ask me anyway. I ain't really trying to canoodle with you like that anyway. But it's like, what is the end goal here? Like, are y'all just doing this to, y'all have numbers that y'all have to, and requirements that y'all have to fill? Or are y'all really, really going to try to make it work? And I think what makes me a little nervous about corporations in general is that we know that there's a higher evil that is still there, that is keeping things separate, but equal, when it ain't even equal. Yeah.
I mean, that's a system of white supremacy, frankly, right? I mean, capitalism intertwined with racism, intertwined with patriarchy, intertwined with all these other isms that are so top down with the power. It's hard to address one issue because it's interlocked with another. So, so I mean, it's so what do we do, right? So it's like, yes, we need these conversations, and one thing I always remind my students is that, you know, social change started very small,
Yeah.
then grew bigger. And so, yes, I know we want to like knock the whole thing down, right?
I
But
do.
right, and just
Oh my, not even gonna lie, I do.
yes, all the time. But you know,
Yeah.
they've been doing this for thousands of years.
Yeah.
So we can't just pull up on them. You see, you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like we need to be very if we pull up on them, that needs to be the distraction, right? Before
Yeah.
the
Ooh,
so
baby, that's facts. That's
you know what
facts.
I'm saying? So I think we have to think about this very critically. I think we need to all hands on deck, all types of options. We can
Yeah.
no longer talk about if we inside the system, outside. We're all in the same system anyway. The system is capitalism, and we're all complicit in it, and we're all. It's all these big corporations that are owning everything, and higher education is like mimicking corporations and how they're running their business, and you know all that other stuff. But it's like the white power structure is rooted at the center of all of this, and so you know, we just have to find ways big and small to try to make small changes and look for each other as the answers and not look at them for the answers because they never gonna give us the answer. Because
Yeah.
the goal is to keep us distracted, right,
Yeah.
from them. And so if we can find a way to recalibrate or kind of readjust our brain to think, okay, well, the system is the problem. The way these white folks are operating the system is problematic. And they don't have to agree on it or not. We don't have to leave some folks behind.
Yeah. No, yeah, no, that's for sure.
That's just the truth.
So I really believe that, and it's interesting how this conversation has been reoccurring in like the recent years, like even as recent as yesterday and the day before with two different people, and we're breaking it down, and even the conversations that even surround something silly like the Grammys and how awards are given and what's happening and why this person isn't being recognized. I'm like, hey, it's right there. They tell you the ins and outs of what the Academy is. You
Mhm.
have the power to insert yourself where you could ultimately do certain things to become part of the Academy. And yes, does the structure ultimately needs to change across the board? Yes. I'm like, but the Academy, whether it be music, film, what radio, whatever, mirrors what happens in the real world as far as politics goes. It's literally the same system. So, you know, everybody that deserves to be in those positions to make certain plays, they're not in them because there's not enough people backing and supporting them that push them forward.
Mhm.
And so we see it with education, we see it with, you know, my sister being a teacher. Vernon was teaching,
Mhm.
you know, at a charter school in St. Louis, and the stories that they call and tell us on a daily basis, that's an episode on its own,
Mhm.
because it's not just the, like you said, it goes back, it's the machine is failing everybody.
Mhm.
Well,
You
it's not failing. It's doing exactly what it set out to do.
right, you right, you show right. And it's scary to see what is coming if the world is still around and not melted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because what's happening with like the Gen Zers and TikTokers, like they don't keep jobs, which is, I'm not big on. Listen, you over it, you over it. I'm okay with that. You're not taking the mess. I'm here for it. But it's also, it's like, but no one is really stepping up to be like trying to make the change. Is they're kind of like, it's the way it is. So which is, you know, a little scary. And even what we're seeing with this upcoming election, like we know that Trump should not be running just based on January 6th alone. We are going to talk about everything else. How y'all did not impeach this man, I don't know. But you have states that are, you know, hey, yo, you treason, you're not on a ballot here. Women's rights, The Joe Biden don't need to be in office either, but it's like we got to pick the lesser of two evils. I'm like, every day you falling.
Every day we fall.
And so I'm just concerned, like, about the state of
Everybody's
this.
too old. Everybody's
Everybody's so old.
If you're over 65, I'm sorry, you should be fired from your state job. Go retire.
Okay. See, I felt that way. I had oddly, so funny you say that because I am an ageist too. I had this conversation with my boss, and the one valid thing that he had to support, people staying in office long. He's like, when you get the good people, what happens once they, like, if they can only serve so many terms that and they have to leave? I said, no, a great person grooms people. When I say groom, it's not the mentor. That's the word. Groom sounds so, yeah. They will mentor somebody that will step into their role and that will take everything that they've learned and apply it and make it 1,000,001 times better. I'm like, but we are so set in, well, you have two people over here that are good and the rest of y'all are trash. And we have to sit through it. Like, I am sick of looking at Mitch McConnell. I am sick of him freezing. I am sick of like all the evil. And we do the same things in these institutes. Like, I think about when we were at Webster, how expensive Webster is, right? There's great things about Webster. But there's a lot of, I don't believe that deans should be making like millions of dollars and the kids can barely afford to go to school. And I was commuting. If it wasn't, like, seriously, if it was not for Mrs. Neal, Janice Neal, shout out to you, the bursar, I probably wouldn't have finished Webster because I had hold after hold after hold on my account and she would lift the hold so I can register. When I see people like that, that's what I mean. She said it was important for her, for kids that look like her, to get it done.
Right.
I gotta lift the hold. All right, cool. You got 24 hours to register. You better go do it now. You know what I mean? So that's what I mean. When we get people in positions of power, we get people that are like Clarence Thomas that abuse power and then don't look out for their own people and the things that are in play. I understand everybody can't be Janice. And I understand that, but we do need more Janices. You're there. You're trying to get there. You're getting there. I know what you got going. You know what I mean? So I think it's like, it's one conversation to say we want these people to advocate for us, like we want this, we want that, but it's like, no, we really got to start infiltrating and doing all that stuff and breaking those barriers down, because it is always based on the monster that is at play, the beast. It is always going to be like this. So it's like, how do we, I'm tired of living in survival mode. Every which way. It's like, these countries are like, oh, y'all can come here and do this. But do y'all like blacks? And it's also, it's so many layers to it. And I just want, if you are not a Black person listening, these are the things that we deal with on a daily basis. And we have, I'm going to say, every person on this call has a level. We have a level of privilege in some places. You know, us being educated alone is a privilege. And y'all higher educated, I wasn't going that far. I wasn't doing that. I love y'all. I wasn't doing that. But it's like, does the conversation now shift to, okay, we're in these spaces that really don't appreciate or understand us and don't see our value. We know that a lot of even HBCUs are getting a lot of their funding and stuff come from white entities. What does that look like for us going forward? Like, how can we pour into each other if we're going to be in these places, in these spaces? What does that really look like? Like, where does that work really, really begin?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think it goes back to your point of, you know, places needing that Miss Neal. Everybody needs Miss Janice Neal. Who are the unsung heroes behind the scenes that we can say maybe this was a small, you may think this is just a small thing that you did, but really it made a big difference. It made a big impact on this student's life or this person's experience. Who
Yeah.
who are those people on campus across the board on all levels, in faculty roles and staff roles? And I think tapping in tapping into their systems or maybe even their hearts or asking those questions of like, why do you operate the way that you do? And sometimes the answers are evident, and sometimes it's like you got to do a little bit of digging around, asking them questions like, so why did you do this? And if it means that it made a difference to somebody, that's what's ultimately gonna hold more weight. So I think it really is identifying those heroes to people who made you feel this way, who gave you opportunities to advance, and how do you give that back to a student, an adjunct, a faculty looking for tenure? How do you support them in that? How do you ignite that passion or whatever it is for them to be able to do the same for somebody else, and them remembering like that why piece too. Like it's I'm sure it's only one Miss Janice Neal, but there's a lot of people who do those things behind the scenes that nobody will ever even know about. But like you said, it made a big difference for your experience. And I think those are, how do we create leadership, more leadership for them to be able to make those type of decisions that have a greater impact on campus communities or organizations or whatever the case is.
Veronica?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, like going to the people who are actually doing the work already, right? So not having to and listening to them, right? And valuing what they're having to say and seeing how they could be assisted, right? Assisted, recognized, rewarded. Because those things, can help pour back into them for the giving that they've been doing and that emotional labor that a lot of Black women in these white spaces do. But yeah, so going to the people who are already doing the work, asking students. I mean, that could be easy as a survey, right? Or interviewing people, right? I mean, that's a study in and of itself. That's me,
Mhm.
maybe doing or being a researcher there. But I mean, that could be. I mean, and there is research, obviously on higher education and but there needs to be more of a focus on the staff aspect that we've just been talking about, right? And the people
Yeah.
who help the university go round, right? I mean, yeah, I go in and teach my class, I go home, right? I don't got nothing to do with no budgets, no offices, no student registry. Like, I don't know none of that, right? Like, I know what I need to teach that day, right? And so, um, acknowledging those people and bringing that work because there's the job description and there's the job
Yeah.
right and so
Yeah.
um, that's important to acknowledge but yeah I mean I think going to and not reinventing the wheel but just going to those folks and putting sometimes those people in a conversation together um,
Hmm.
and showing how that could brainstorm and they can come up, folks come up with amazing ideas and thinking about ways that can be implemented. And in some cases, it could be possibly implemented into universities, what we call strategic plan. I know you know what that is, D. Goines, the university strategic plans and over the next 5 years, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? But, you know, for GSU, it might be a little bit easier for us to get some of those things done just because we are in Atlanta and we do have a lot of Black staff just in general at Georgia State University. Um,
Yeah.
and so, I just want us to also think, how that might look vastly different at Emory University, right?
Hmm.
Where it is very white, a very suburban campus. I mean, very, very low percentage of Black students, even lower percentage of Black faculty. So they're in a different situation, right? And so who knows? Maybe it could be a multi-campus effort, right? And we put those folks who don't have a lot of people at Emory in conversation with us at Georgia State. These are
Okay.
things, you know what I'm saying? Like, so
Yeah.
power numbers and creating coalitions amongst Black faculty, maybe within kind of a university system, or just in your same kind of city.
Do y'all have a portal? Does that exist? Like,
So
like how we have like PRSSA or like NABJ, stuff like that, where it's like all these Black like journalists and publicists can all come together, or so it's like
probably not systemic university wide like that, because
there you go.
yeah, so it would have to be, but honestly, I wouldn't even want it to be in the system.
Oh, okay.
Because it's white. Is at the top. Who's at the top?
I don't want them to be watching what we're doing. So I would rather
it would have to be like what's the one show with Yaya and Regina where they would meet underground, kinda. They would meet.
Listen, Harriet Tubman was on some. She would listen. The underground rep. We need to go back underground.
It's something there. Like I always say that, and even this is really random, but I was telling my mom, I said, it's a lot of people, and I said how Missouri is staying red is a lot of in the counties, in those little weird hick towns, that the people that are they're running unopposed. There's nobody blue going against them.
Right.
And so I said, y'all need to find the whites that's y'all allies and infiltrate and make them run.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of start turning policy that way. I know that sounds like that's a lot of work that I'm not interested in doing, but it's a step for somebody, whoever take the information, do what you will. But I mean, that would be really dope if there was like a secret network of black.
There probably is, and they don't want us to know that, and which I respect. You know what I'm saying? And so, although we have our big conferences, we have Association of Black Sociologists, and there's Association of Black Psychologists, and all these other things, but and I'm sure there's probably people doing it in very small ways.
Yeah.
But, it is hard to get all those people to connect and things like that. So I mean, I think that, for me, I know once I get tenure next year, I feel like I will be able to link better with other, folks at other universities. But, I got to make sure to take care of my house first.
Right. So I get,
you know what I'm saying? Be here, long term. And so, but I mean, I think I hope people listening will get some of the nuggets, from stuff we're saying, and helpful for sure.
Man, I appreciate y'all so much for stopping by, but I want to end with this question. How is your mental health being in these spaces? And, what are things that you do to just decompress? How do you take care of yourself, day in and day out?
I think for me, what's this, February? I'm on year 2. I'm going on my 2-year anniversary of talking to a therapist.
Oh, yay! Love it.
Not that I didn't want to before, but I just didn't know how accessible the service was. And so year 2 for me on that, I think, she calls me out on shit like, well, you're taking care of everybody else, what you doing for yourself type of thing. And so really being able to have just a little time for myself before the chaos at home, before the chaos at work, on the drive to work. And then just knowing, like, when I pick up my kid and seeing how her day was, really it's like, oh, okay, you didn't experience this today. That makes me feel good and gives me hope for, like, okay, we still got an opportunity to change how you experience life through the education system. If at this early age you are saying somebody that didn't look like me was sitting by themselves, so I went and sat with them, and we did this or we did that. So that it gives me hope, and I think it checks my mental health because I'm constantly thinking about how the world can be better for my kid. And
Mhm.
when I hear her experience of the day and her stories, I'm like, cool. But overall, I think my mental health is good. It's very easy to get stressed out going through job searches and processes and meeting with search firms and all of that. And for me, I feel like I'm constantly maybe comparing my experiences to somebody that is a little bit more seasoned. But then we go back to the conversations of it's time for something new. Why are these the only two options? And I can be one of those options. So understanding that, the landscape is changing and it's really my time. I think that's what gives me the motivation to just keep doing what I'm doing and not really thinking about who that other candidate is or what experience do they have that I don't, because I know I possess characteristics and skills and personality traits that they don't. And so once I can shut all that off, and I think the constant reminder of just telling yourself like, yo, you the shit sometimes, like
Mhm.
taking that advice from the therapist to say like, yo, celebrate yourself. You don't always have to be so humble. And I think that's the struggle. But then at the end of the day, looking at it like, you know what, like, damn, like we are the shit.
I love it. I love it. Veronica?
Yes, I love that. You got to remind yourself that you're the shit every once in a while
Yeah.
because folks might be having you out here think otherwise.
Yeah.
So
We are not basic. We're not basic. And we'll always remember that.
absolutely not. So one thing that I too have been in therapy. I had started therapy my last year, my PhD, because Lord have mercy, that dissertation was a beast, right? And going in the academic job market and all that other stuff. And um, so I've been in therapy for about maybe 4 or 5 years now, and I absolutely love it. I was going like weekly, and then it's kind of tapered off now, where I just check in once a month. But I've done that work to help with my anxiety, and because academia can be a very anxiety ridden
Yeah.
space, as Dee is mentioning, and there's always someone who thinks there might be in competition with you, or there's always this expectation of this bar that you have to kind of get. For me, it's like annual tenure review, like you have having to make it just to get tenure and all that stuff. So one thing that I learned to always check in with myself like throughout the day, just to like really see how I'm feeling. Be like, ooh, am I feeling overwhelmed? Like, let me stop and just sit for a second and breathe for 5 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
literally doing that, or just like, how am I breathing? Like checking in and just like taking deep breaths. Like, sometimes you just need to breathe, bruh. Like, it literally is just that. Those are things I learned from my therapist. And additionally, on top of that, when checking in with myself, with the breathing and my energy, but also evaluating my capacity every day. So
Mhm.
like if I know I have this on my calendar, right? If I'm set out to write chapter 3 of a book chapter or a book or whatever, right? And I'm saying, okay, well I thought I was going to write 10 pages. But if I sit down and my capacity is only telling me to write 3, I'm only going to write 3. And
Yeah.
adjusting your goals with your daily capacity and
Yeah.
like finally like figuring that out and like mastering that has been a game changer, a game freaking changer, because now I don't have anxiety about what I'm not going to do when I know that, okay, my energy was just enough for this today. And then you
Yeah.
pick up and do it tomorrow. And then you
Yeah.
celebrate those small wins. Like, yes, like I accomplished my writing for this week. That makes
Yeah.
me happy. I'm going to drink a glass of wine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Small accomplishments add up to the bigger goal. So
Yeah.
I agree, celebrating those small pieces each step of the way is super important.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I'll just give y'all a quick tidbit. I'm the same way, anxiety, all those different things, overthinking, living in my head, especially as a creative, and understanding and appreciating knowing who I am, celebrating myself, small little wins,
Mhm.
uh, and just pushing forward, but also living in the now.
Yes.
And a lot of our anxiety and stressors come from things that likely won't ever even happen
Mhm.
because our mind is it be playing those games with us, those mental games with us for sure. And so I just want to that y'all, I'm on the same thing, taking the deep breaths and whatever that, like, I get massages, I do all these different things to just to really back in, so I do feel good because, like I said, I be in my head. But I want all of us to remember that we are not crack. We are the purest form of cocaine, baby. And don't let nobody treat you like you a crack rock, okay? Cocaine, pure.
Pure.
I'm dying.
And with that said, tell everybody, Veronica, you just got an amazing email, and while we were offline, share with the can you say what it is, or can
I don't
you
want to
just
say yet. I don't want to say yet.
okay, that's cool. That's
Okay.
D.
Yo.
Do we have an update?
Beginning processes.
Okay.
Beginning phases in the process. But need all y'all listeners out there, just put in some good vibes on this pursuit of a university chancellorship. I would say that. Yeah, that's what we're gonna put.
Listen, they need to stop playing in your face. They know what it is. They know what it is. That's what I was like. Stop playing. Stop playing. And they for sure need you over there because Larry isn't even there anymore. So they need us.
It's time to do it. We know what it can be. We know what the place can be.
Yep.
We all are attracted there for one reason or another, and so there's some opportunities to change the game and continue on with the changing landscape.
Yes.
And also, everybody out there, believe Black women, listen to Black women, and
cite Black women.
And cite your sources.
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
Oh, I do have a co-authored book coming out that I would like to plug. May 2024, me and my co-authors are dropping a book with Routledge Press called The Sociology of Cardi B, a Trap Feminist Approach.
Hey.
We are expanding Black feminism to include women, hood chicks. Dominic, you will love this. You will love this book. I need to bring my co-authors on here. Cardi B Collective.
We can definitely do that, and hold me a copy because I'll be there in May, so I'm gonna need you to sign mine.
Bet the cover is sick. Let me show y'all the cover real quick. Hold on, I got it.
If you need security for that book signing, I got that.
Okay.
Oh yeah, go in security.
Here we go.
The book is the cover is crazy. We got this artist, a Black woman artist actually, to design it, and can y'all see it?
Ooh,
that was nice.
Okay, nails, earrings, hair, everything.
Yep. Yeah. So it's an author piece. So yeah. So anyway, so it's definitely, so we are basically kind of just discussing women like Cardi B who are doing feminism and naming the type of feminism that they're doing. And again, listening to Black women, you may not like the way they talk or like the lingo that they use, but their knowledge is just as valid as any Black woman's knowledge. And so we want this book to name the knowledge that they produced, and hopefully people will enjoy it.
Yes. Well, thank y'all so much. Thank you so much for being here. And I want to definitely for sure do this again. I want to check in with us and, maybe do in a couple of months a check-in. And as things come about,
yes,
things that you guys both are working on that are secret at the moment, I just want to let y'all know that I appreciate y'all so much for coming here, and I love y'all so much, and y'all make me proud. And that's it. I'm not gonna cry because I'm not Mary J. Blige, but I really want to let y'all know that I see y'all, I hear y'all, and I love y'all, and I appreciate all the work that you both are doing. So with that being said, y'all be sure to like, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends. Have a candle line, buy a candle. If you're going into spring, light up your home, make it smell fresh and good. And we gonna see y'all here next week.
Ow.